Welcome everyone to our HogvilleNET football segment. I'm Kevin McPherson. I'll be your host today, joined once again by Mike Irwin, the longtime all sports, all Razorback sports. He's drilled in, dialed in, and that's why we like having him on because we can delve into just about anything, and he's got not only a good opinion, but an educated opinion. And that's what we want. We want to bring information to Arkansas Razorbacks fans, and Mike Irwin's one of the best to do it. So, Mike, welcome in. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Well, let's jump right into it. It was week one. We're actually now spilling over into week two. We're still early in the week, but when you look at the Ryan Silverfield era at Arkansas, it was interesting. A week ago, Sunday, when the announcement was made, it took 4 or 5 days till Thursday to bring him in for an official press conference with Hunter Yurachek. In between there, he had a signing class on the high school level. During the press conference, we learned about a couple of retention pieces, some staff additions, things like that that have also, been announced. So this ball has been rolling pretty quickly. And I guess what else would you expect? Because you don't want to sit on your hands with a new coach. You want to get the ball rolling on multiple fronts. But talk to me about some of your impressions from week one, including that introductory press conference.
It started out on Sunday morning, and he had about a rough 4 or 5 hours when people were almost overwhelmingly negative because they weren't expecting that hire. They thought whoever they wanted, and it was split about who most fans wanted. There wasn't a solid name there, but it just was. There wasn't a good immediate reaction. There was even a protest by some students on campus. That quickly changed when he got into his office, and the first thing he started doing was trying to flip in-state kids who had committed to out-of-state schools, and he did I think in one or maybe a little spilling over into the next day. He got 4 of them back. 3 of them were 4-stars, and that kind of turned it around. And then signing day hits on Wednesday, and I think he ended up with 17. That's the last time I checked. It's a pretty good class. I wouldn't call it great, but considering the situation he's in, it's pretty good. I think most people realize that if they're going to turn this thing around for next year, and the interesting thing is, again, that Silverfield said on multiple occasions, he's not coming in here to do it in 3 years. He's coming in here to do it next year. So you don't do that with a freshman signing class. I don't care how many you sign. You're going to have to go into the portal. And that's the big question. And that remains the big question. And there was one little thing that Yurachek said about money that really has stirred some negative talk now as it's switched back a little bit, gone a little bit negative. Because Yurachek said that, he said, we have the resources, translation of that money, we have the resources to be top half of the SEC, not bottom where we're at now. In coaches' salaries, staff salaries, rev sharing, and then he said legitimate NIL. And when he used that word, most fans were smart enough to pick up on the fact that he is basically saying that some of these schools have been continuing to offer big NIL deals or accept big NIL deals from agents and players when theoretically, according to the House court settlement, which is being administered now by the Power Four conferences and a committee of athletic directors, that was supposed to end on July 1st. It's not been enforced. And Yurachek, about 2 months ago, acknowledged to me that it wasn't being enforced, but he said he expected it to be enforced starting in January. So that would go along with what he said. He would refer to that as illegitimate. You cannot do big NIL deals after January 1st, he believes. And there's just no indication that's true. And here's the problem. You've got several schools themselves and some individual agents that have already threatened to sue any school that tries to reduce NIL. Their position is you have no right to tell us what kind of NIL deal we get. If we get $100 million for an athlete, that's our business, not yours. It's pre-market, just like it would be if a coach went out and you paid him $100 million. And so they threatened to sue. And we know what schools have done when faced with lawsuit threats. They've done nothing. It scares them. Now, there is a possible solution. There is a bill in the U.S. House of Representatives that's stuck right now. They haven't been able to pass it. If it passes, it would provide legal protection against being sued. So that would allow this court settlement to go through and allow it to be enforced like it was originally intended. But nobody knows whether it's going to go through. Nobody knows if it does go through, when it will be, but it's probably not going to be by January. So that leaves me with kind of a speculation here. But if Ryan Silverfield said, we're going to do this in 1 year, there's only one way he can do it in 1 year, and that is he must think he can get the rev share or the NIL money he needs. And I do not personally believe, after talking to a lot of people about this, that they have enough to do that. So they're going to have to get it sometime in the next month. And Hunter, your check at that celebration thing at the indoor where Ryan Silverfield met the fans.
Yeah.
He mentioned that he had gone into a skybox to talk to a booster, and the booster emerged 5 minutes later and came to your check and told him, I agreed to a 7-figure deal with him. So he's basically saying, look, this guy knows how to negotiate. And there's evidence that he does, because at Memphis, he did the NIL.
Right.
He went out and got the NIL money. So he's good at that. He's also got his own agent or his own GM that would regulate all that and decide who gets what, where,
Right.
So all of that's good. But that's his challenge, is in the next month. I don't know how much he needs, because none of those numbers were released. I mean, your check didn't. He said, I can't tell you what the numbers are. Silverfield was asked. He said, no, I'm not going to tell you the numbers. So we don't know how much more they need. It might be 20 million. It might be 25 million. It might be 30. It might be 15. But whatever they need in order to do what Hunter Yurchek said, which is be competitive in the top half of the SEC, he's going to have to raise that money, in my opinion, in the next 3 weeks, maybe.
And that's where when the portal opens up, right? So you're trying to
Yes.
You're trying to get yourself as situated as competitively as you can, because now you have you have gone on the record everywhere, right? Like you said, with this hire about what the standard's going to be. So now you got to meet that standard. Hopefully you exceed it, but at least meeting it would put Arkansas somewhere it hasn't been since NIL's really become a thing, and so that would be progress. Silverfield doing a great job flipping recruits in state, like you said. Apparently impressing a big pocketed booster to the tune of a 7-digit commitment toward NIL, and so we'll see where this goes in terms of those things. One of the things that when I'm looking at, we talk about the class and the 17 players, and we know that that's really how you start a culture, and a foundation of a culture is through development and retention. But that's down the line. There are going to be expectations to win, even starting next year. Maybe we need to pump the brakes on how many wins, but Silverfield hasn't backed away from that. And one of the ways to get some momentum in that, and I thought he had that at his introductory press conference, was bringing in Quincy Rhodes Jr. and KJ Jackson into the room to announce that they're coming back to play at Arkansas. You're talking about an all-league performer on defense and a sky's the limit potential quarterback who we only seen glimpses of, but that's pretty heady stuff on both sides of the ball. To say I've also got these guys on my side. What are your thoughts about that? And then the potential for more retention, because we've already seen it in the last couple of days, a couple of players actually go in the portal, which we'll get to. But what about KJ and Rhodes and how that can really help?
Well, I think it was big, very big, especially, and we'll get into the defensive coordinator, but the defensive coordinator that they hired, his reputation is blitz pressure and disguising blitz pressure, and multiple defensive fronts disguising that. So it's all about confusing the opposing quarterback. It's about confusing offensive linemen, and you need an edge rusher like Quincy Rhodes Jr. So that's good to have that. I also that was 4 days ago, and we've only had 2 hit the portal since then, right? One of them was from defense, but he's a guy that didn't play much.
Right.
The other is on the offensive side. And I think that's significant because it doesn't look like I would have thought there'd been more people entering the portal. So there's some evidence to suggest that that's the other way this team gets better next year is if the guys that really perform for you this year, if most of them come back, that's experience and people that know this team and will help with leadership. So retaining those guys is important too. You got to bring in guys out of the portal. Maybe one or two true freshmen could contribute, heavily, maybe. So if you have that in your signing class, and then if you can retain some key parts of this offense and defense, and I can hear people laughing. Why would you want any part of that defense to read? Well, Quincy Rhodes Jr. I mean, come on. If you don't think it's important to have him come back, you don't know much about football.
Well, the SEC coaches, Mike, I'm going to interrupt you. Just it's a perfect timing. Just today, he was named All SEC by the coaches, by the league coaches.
Right.
Coaches Quincy Rhodes. Go ahead.
The other two aren't coming back, but he is.
Right.
So that's important. So again, when you put all of this together, it's still early. I don't want to make any pronouncements here. All I'll just say is that aside from that early 3 or 4 hour period in which there was an immediate negative reaction by both fans and media alike, since then it's been fairly positive. There have been a few little questions, few little ups and downs, but I would say a week and a day, 2 days into this, it's looking a lot better than I thought it would look. And they just have to keep the momentum. Now, what we don't have right now, because you hired, I mean, if we're going to get into this, but if you look at the offensive staff, he's either brought in people from Memphis or people that he's had previous relationships with. He's basically an offensive guy.
Yep.
And it looks like to me that what he's decided is, I want my people or people that know me and know what I want and know how I do things. Now, the other negative reaction was he made this statement. He said, and this was early on, he said, when you see my staff, the staff that I put together, you're going to be blown away. And then when some of these names started emerging, I think some of the fans thought, well, wait a minute, you're going to go steal Ohio State's offensive coordinator. You're going to go steal, a quarterback's coach from this school, and you're going to, these names, they're going to do that. Well, I don't think that's what he was talking about. I think he was talking about, I'm going to bring in people that know what I want. We will all work together. We will work every day, because that's what he said. To turn this around, you can't take time off. Every day you're going to have to be committed and come in and get things accomplished. And I think these are the guys he feels comfortable with. On the defensive side, this is a new staff member for him. Ron Roberts was at Florida last year, and people go, oh, grown in Florida. Come on, their head coach got fired. Well, the 2 previous years to that, they had really good defenses. This guy had a good defense at Auburn. He was a defensive coordinator at Baylor when they won the Big 12. So he's got good credentials. And I think it's significant that we haven't heard any of these specific position coaches announced yet, because it sounds like to me that Silverfield is basically going to say, you can consult with me. We'll do this together, but I'll let you make the guys. You're going to have to be working with these guys. I'll let you bring in your guys. I've got my guys in on the offensive side.
Yeah.
And I think over the next few days, we'll see some of these positions announced.
And I think
linebackers coach, a defensive line coach, secondary coach, and maybe 2 of them, maybe safeties and maybe corners, things like that.
Yeah, and the results will be what matter the most. But I think it might be an indication of when your CEO recognizes what his strengths are and when to defer. Again, results we'll judge it based on that. But maybe this is his way of saying, I'm going to turn the defense over to the expert that I just hired to run it. And I'll consult with him, like you said, defer to him. A couple of things about what you said about the retention and a guy like Quincy Rhodes. And you look at Arkansas's record, winless in the SEC, lost 10 straight. Why would you want to keep any of those players? Let's not forget, this team was competitive in every game except the Notre Dame game. I know Texas got away after halftime. Missouri ended up being a double digit, but we know Arkansas was there going into the 4th quarter. Arkansas wasn't too far away from the players they had, having a winning season, being a bowl team. And so it's about, to me, when he talked about discipline, trying to eliminate things like turnovers and penalties. Had Arkansas had that kind of discipline on both sides of the ball, we might be talking about different results and not a coaching change. And so I could see why you would want to keep players that helped you at least be competitive in the league, even if your record didn't look like you were competitive. That was probably one of the best winless SEC teams ever, only because they were right there with chances to win games. So it's kind of a loaded point to make. I think the other thing is not a whole lot of names in the portal like you brought up, Mike. I just wanted to follow up on that. Is there any sense that maybe they're still hashing out how they want to retain guys, how much money they're willing to spend for certain guys, and that might impact that? Because even though technically they can get in the portal now because of the coaching change, they still have some time to work some of that out. So that we might see some more go in. Who knows? But I think right now it is positive that not too many have jumped in when they could have 9 days ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you say, that could change at any minute. And when it happens, it usually has to do with things that we might not know about initially. They might have told some guys, look, we're bringing in this person, we're bringing in that person. You'd probably be better off hitting the portal. So we've seen that before. And they're not going to come out of a meeting and walk out and stand in front of a TV camera or a newspaper or internet reporter and say, hey, yeah, I'm hitting the portal. They told me that I'd be better off if I left. They're not going to do that. So you kind of have to figure that out on your own. But again, I think when we start talking about some of these hires that have already been made, it becomes apparent to me that a big part of what Silverfield hopes to do is to eliminate mistakes, because you're seeing people come in that, for instance, this wasn't a mistake, but I already mentioned your defensive coordinator has a reputation for disguising his blitz coverages, or his blitz, not coverages, but his blitzes.
Right.
And that has been a huge problem, maybe as long as Sam Pittman was here. They just never seemed to be able to attack. In fact, there were way too many just 3-man rushes. And I kept thinking to myself, you can't sometimes get to the quarterback with blitzes, with 5 guys coming. How are you going to do it with 3? And so again, I'm going to reserve judgment, because I've heard this before and I only believe it when I see it. But it looks like this defensive coordinator is going to come in with the idea, in the SEC, almost everybody throws the ball. A lot of them have really good quarterbacks. You got to pressure those guys. You got to force them. I mean, we saw, with Arch Manning, if you give him time to throw, he's really good. Yeah. His problem was that teams that got to him quickly, he made some really bad decisions. I think that happened a lot, to Taylon Green. And so if you can put pressure on a quarterback, and I mean quick pressure, then that changes the course of a game and what he can do to you. So I think they're going to try to do that.
On the offensive side of the ball, I think you've got the names. You kind of reference the fact that Silverfield's leaning on former staff members he brought with him from Memphis, including his offensive coordinator. But can you go through some of what you've got, what you've accumulated there in terms of what that looks like and what their names are and position groups?
Yeah. The offensive coordinator's Tim Cramsey, and he's from Memphis. I think he's been with him 2 years. And he sort of projects his offensive philosophy, which is, we're going to throw the ball a lot, but we want to be able to run it too. But maybe our running game is a complement to our passing game. If you have a good passing game, but you don't have a good running game, defenses can just pin their ears back and come at you. So he's got a reputation of maybe a pass first guy, but still wants a strong running game to come back when they start blitzing or putting too much pressure on you. Then you come back and run the ball. So that's your coordinator. The guy, the most impressive, and everybody's got their own individual opinions, but to me, the most impressive addition to this staff so far is David Johnson. He's the running backs coach, and he was at Florida State. This guy he was also a recruiting coordinator, and he is an unbelievable recruiter. He can go get 5 stars. He has a reputation of doing that. He had a couple of 5-star running backs while he was at Florida. And this could be a coincidence, but I don't think it is. There's a 5-star running back at Texas that played quite a bit the last 2 years, and he's hit the portal. So a lot of people have their eye on this guy thinking, is he coming here? He may not, but this is what David Johnson has a reputation of doing, being able to recruit. And so keep an eye on this guy. He's also, he puts good, the one thing he does, and there was a remark made by one of the Florida State fans saying, well, I'm looking forward not to having four different running backs play in one game because he has a reputation of playing multiple players. In other words, I'm not going to come at you with my starter and maybe have a guy come in and give him a breather every once in a while. He'll play 3, even 4 running backs in a game. Yeah. And to me, that's good. If you get injuries, you've still got issues, or you still got answers. But also, I think it really helps guys stay fresh. And if he really understands the rotation, which you got to believe he would, then I can tell you that just talk to too many defensive players over the years, that sometimes can be a shock to you when you're used to a certain running back and then boom, another guy comes in and he's got a different style. And then you get used to that. And then here's a third style and then a fourth. That can, again, that goes along with this idea that you're going to keep people confused, Well, so I like that hire. I like that hire a lot.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing that I want to mention. They're apparently going to have 2 offensive line coaches. And one of them, Jeff Myers, was his offensive line coach at Memphis. The second one, Silverfield had a relationship when he was in the NFL with the player, Marcus Johnson, when he was in the NFL. Silverfield was I think kind of, I don't know what his title was. I don't think he was an actual position coach, but he was there and he knew him from there. And this kid was also, I believe, was on the staff initially the year before Ryan Silverfield took over at Memphis. So they have a relationship with each other, but he is the assistant or was the assistant offensive line coach at Ohio State. Okay, that's an assistant to the real guy. He's apparently not coming in here as an assistant. Now, Marcus Johnson does have the title offensive line coach and run game coordinator, which I think you do that to give him more money. Okay, so why don't you call Marcus Johnson why don't you call him an assistant offensive line coach like he was at Ohio State? Because maybe what they're going to do is one of those coaches is going to coach the interior lineman, the center and the two guards, and the other is going to coach the guys out on the edge, the tackles and the tight ends. And one thing that makes me think that may be happening is there's been no mention of Morgan Turner, Arkansas's tight ends coach. And he, of all the coaches on that staff, he's the one with the best credentials. He's one I thought they might try to keep, but maybe not. And this may be the answer, because if you add up all these numbers, it looks like they're full. They've got a full contingent of offensive coaches. So be prepared for that anyway, that you may have two actual offensive line coaches. One of them coaches interior offensive linemen, and the other coaches the tight ends and the tackles. So we'll see if that works out that way. Yeah. They've also added a special teams coach, Chad Lunsford. And the deal with this guy is that his special teams have a reputation of good punt returners. That's what's been missing at Arkansas. Now, what we don't know, because Scott Fountain, he got criticized by a lot of Fountain fans, but you cannot criticize him for the kickers that he brought in. I mean, Arkansas has had field goal kickers, kickoff guys, punters. You couldn't complain about that. The complaints have been about sending guys out there in a punting situation or a kickoff situation or whatever, and you don't have enough guys out there, and you get a flag thrown, you got too many out there. And there are a lot of screw-ups. We saw Bobby Petrino just yelling at times because when they had to have a special teams unit come out on the floor, they weren't ready. And it's like, what have you been doing over there? You weren't prepared to send these guys out. Well, this guy has a reputation of they don't get penalties. They don't have a lot of these penalties. So, again, they're trying to solve some problems here, I think. The only thing I don't know about him, and if they keep the guy they've got, Starzik, who's a really good field goal kicker, then they're all right. But if he hits the portal, then I don't know what we're talking about here. I mean, they'd have to bring somebody in. And I don't know enough about him to know about his reputation with kickers. I just know what I've read about what he's done with special teams. So that's where we're at right now.
a
We're
couple,
going to know more as
yeah,
a few days go by.
couple of thoughts just popped in my head while you were going through that. Great job, by the way, of breaking that down and explaining things. I think it does help paint the picture of what might be going on there. But when you mentioned the running backs, I think when you look at the NFL over the last few years, fewer and fewer workhorse workload running backs. You have it by committee, and you get those change of pace players. You've got one that might be a hammer, one that's got speed and get to the edge. So there's a multitude of ways to approach that to keep the defense on its heels, and some of the change of pace stuff. So if you're going to employ that many backs, I think that can be a positive if your recruiting is strong, because you're going to have to. It's always going to be about the Jimmies and Joes in the SEC. The other thing is when you mentioned special teams, I started thinking about as good as the kickers have been, how about the punting? Arkansas's had really good punt coverage. Despite all of its issues, it's had really good punt coverage and punters that can really, you know, flip the field. They haven't always had that. And in recent years they have. And so I'm keeping an eye on several things because when we take for granted about how bad Arkansas was in the win-loss column, but it wasn't just some of the positives on offense. Some of the special teams play is what kept them in games. And so that's going to be important moving forward as well when you have a new coaching staff. So I'm glad you went through all of that. And I'm fascinated to continue to pay attention to and see what happens on the defensive side of the ball, because when I heard Robert's name initially, right after Silverfield was hired, that was who he was going after, I thought that was a big, I thought that was a, not necessarily a bold move that was unattainable. I thought they could get him, but I thought it was a good move. That was my perspective on that. So I thought that was another positive. Uh, just really, as we look at some other things here. By the way, if we didn't mention it before, the SEC coaches came out with their all league teams today, and we said Quincy Rhodes Jr., who Arkansas is going to keep on the defensive side. On the offensive side was offensive lineman Junior Carmona, as well as Arkansas's first one and only season running back out of New Mexico State, Mike Washington Jr., who was one of the positives on this team. Yes, he lost a couple of tough fumbles, but man, he 1,000-yard rusher. If Arkansas could have kept from turning the ball over and having penalties in the red zone, maybe this guy goes for 10 to 15 touchdowns. He was close. I think he finished with 8 rushing touchdowns, but good on those guys. The offensive line graded well this year, did it not, Mike? I mean, Mateus did his job on that side of the ball.
Yeah, the only complaint was the inconsistencies. They sometimes looked like
Yeah.
great on a possession, and they come back the next possession. They've been running the ball, then they can't run. Or Taylor Green had been completing a lot of passes, and he had plenty of time. And then you come back out the next position, and you don't have it. So there was some inconsistency issues there. But as I said, if you look at who all is still on this team, uh, I would say that's the deepest position in terms of experience if all those guys come back. And again, it remains to be seen now that we know Mateos is not being retained. But I will say this: it looks like to me so far that most of these players are taking the attitude, we got a month. You don't have to jump in. Even if you jump in the portal, you can come back out.
That's right.
So I think they're taking the attitude, I'm just going to get to know these guys and try to get a feel for what this is going to be like. And then we could see a flurry of activity as we approach January 1st. And we may see a lot more of these guys leave. And if we do, that probably means they're really active and going to be active at bringing guys in. But again, I don't know how this is going to play out as we sit here, second week of December.
Right. I think when you realize just how important now the portal is going to be going both ways, we're laser focused. I mean, we can't play football for a while. Spring is a ways out, but everything that's going to matter, even in year one, is started with this high school class. But really the big part of it, and the ones that are going to really factor into what your results are next year, are who you retain and who you get out of the portal. And again, I go back to the introductory press conference. Really impressed with bringing those two studs in on each side of the ball. And before we sign off today, what was your overall, because so much was said in that press conference. You hit on some of it, talking about some of the things that were said about NIL and some other things, but just in general, looking at the performance of Silverfield, if you're going to grade a press conference, most coaches win them. And even what Juracek, his part in that press conference, what was your overall takeaways, just how you felt about it? Satisfied, too many unanswered questions? Did they address what they needed to? Was it smart strategically to wait 4 or 5 days after he was officially hired to do that? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, so far I think it's good. I wouldn't call it great. I'm not knocked out by anything,
No.
but I haven't. I'm not looking at anything and saying, "Whoa, wait a minute, that could be a bad deal." There are some things you want to keep an eye on, but so far it looks okay. I think as we move forward, the number one thing, and I want to come back to this, is how much money do they have? Because I think all you have to do is look at Texas Tech, how they went from being a team that lost to Arkansas in the bowl game to now they are seeded in the playoffs. They don't even have to play a first round game. And they spent $44 million on their team. So that tells you what you can do if you have the money. So where's this money going to come from? And look, it's not just Arkansas. It's everybody's looking to figure out how they're going to get more money. And there was a story that came out today that you really ought to keep an eye on if you're a football fan. And that is Utah has agreed to sign a deal with a private equity fund. This is a business that is essentially going to take over the management of their money. They're going to be the ones that decide we're going to spend this, we're going to do this. This is how we bring money in. This is how we're going to sell your merchandise. Now, most athletic departments do farm out some of their stuff. Arkansas does. Their TV rights are farmed out. There's a company that gives Arkansas, we'll pay you directly this much money and then we'll manage it. And merchandise, I think, is handled privately. They go back and forth on that. So I'm not sure how that is. But this would be essentially Utah deciding we're pretty much going to turn this over to a private company. And your athletic director at a normal university, the athletic director has a lot of staff people, but he's got businessmen on his staff that know how to deal with money issues. He's got accountants. And if you go this direction, what you're saying is, we think we'd be better off if we just turn that over to somebody else and let them handle that. And then we don't have to employ all these people. We employ fewer people, and we just let them take a percentage of what they generate and give the rest of it to us, and we'll end up better off. But there are a lot of people that are saying that is very dangerous to do that, to turn it all over. The lure of it is you get a lot of money up front. These companies will offer you a big bunch of money, which might help you in this portal period. Wow. Utah is clearly thinking, hey, we're going to get an extra, $400 or $500 million just shoved at us right here. Now, it'll even out over a period of time. Now, the Big Ten, it looked like they might enter into an agreement for their entire conference with one of these private equity firms. And they've blocked it so far. There's been 2 member schools that said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to turn our finances completely over to somebody else. And I personally think it's a mistake. I think it's dangerous when you let people who are outside your control in a different building, maybe in a different state, and you're talking to them over the phone about your money situations. You don't know if they have an excess money, they might invest it in something and then it goes away. There's a stock market crash or whatever. All of a sudden you had a deficit you didn't know about. It just, maybe it's old school thinking on my part, but this idea that the athletic director is just going to have to worry about making sure he's got coaches that can win, making sure they recruit well, and I'll leave it up to somebody else to bring all the money in here and handle the money and all that stuff. They'll just say, here's your money. We're taking this money. We'll take this percentage of it. But remember, you might remember that NIL situation that was going on, and I think it was at Oregon State, and it was about 2 months ago, and it was right before Arkansas's Edge program went kaput because Arkansas had to deal with these people. And what they did, they came in and offered a big bunch of money up front, but after that initial money, they were going to get about half of everything they raised. And people are going, wait a minute, it looks good up front in the long term. Nobody offers you a deal like that if they don't think they're going to come out on top in the end. So this whole private equity thing is a little bit worrisome to me because they apparently realize that they can entice you with a bunch of money up front, but they must be thinking they're going to come out on the big end of this later on. And that would be less money for the athletics department, whatever school you're talking about or whatever conference. But that's something to keep an eye on. It's all about money, Kevin.
Yeah.
They're all of them are looking at novel ways to raise extra money.
Well, I think they still use the phrase or the descriptor student athletes, but it's
Oh
always been a
no.
business, but now it's a whole different animal, and these are professional players as well. We can look at it that way now because they're being compensated to play. I don't know, where it goes from here because it seems to me that it's ever evolving. And like you said, be careful for what you jump in. Be careful with whom you jump in bed with when you're jumping in a pile of money, because at some point it might not be what is really beneficial for what you're really all about. And I think when you mention Eurocheck sort of signaling some things about what other schools are doing. You want to make sure that Arkansas's not too trigger shy to do what it can to be as aggressive as it can be. But by that same token, you don't want to end up being uh, making things even more problematic for a program that's already struggling at the bottom. And so, who are the smart people in the room? They're going to figure it out and help Arkansas get to where it needs to be because I think, on Silverfield's part, at least there's an advantage or a bonus that this guy's on some level a salesman. He can sell himself, sell his program, and motivate people. I think, the old all hands on deck, and I don't think that's a strength necessarily of Juracek. So at least there's some positives there. But the stuff you just brought up here at the end, I think we could be talking about something else in a week from now.
Right.
When someone else cooks up some other scheme out there, because there's a lot of that going on, and some will figure out what works, and they'll be ahead of the curve, and others may take a wrong turn, and we'll see. We hope Arkansas is going to start limiting the wrong turns and start having better decisions on the field and off. I want to thank you, Mike Irwin, for joining me. I want to tell everybody out there, no, we did not compare notes and choreograph wearing earth tones. We both are. It's just a happy coincidence. It's a happy coincidence today. Thank you for joining us on HogvilleNet Football, our segment going A to Z on this new hire. It's only been a week plus. We got a lot more to talk about later, but Mike Irwin, thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Till next time, everyone, appreciate all of you. Be great in all your endeavors. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.